We've got some brand new reports suggesting that Sony Pictures is going to make a Kraven the Hunter Solo movie. There is also a massive difference between what Sony looks to be doing with Kraven and what they did with Venom and Morbius. What's up, everybody? It's Josh. Welcome back to the channel. Do me a favor and smash that like button like Kraven the Hunter, and let's get right into this juicy Marvel news. This is yet again another huge exclusive coming from the Illuminati. I've said Illuminati way too many times in the past couple of weeks, and I will actually be talking about that more at the end of the video because these guys came out of nowhere with a ton of really juicy and newsworthy exclusives. But first, let's talk about this very exclusive because it's a big deal. I'm going to read right from the report here. It says the Illuminati has seen the casting grid for the potential Kraven the Hunter Solo film, and it could have a direct impact within the MCU. It seems like Kraven will be very similar to the version from the core Marvel Comics universe. He's specifically referred to as a maniacal big game hunter. But unlike Venom and Morbius, which largely tried not to refer to Spider-Man directly, Kraven is also specifically mentioned to be hunting Spider-Man. This puts him square center in the middle of the MCU, making their antagonism a core part of the character and begging for a confrontation. The report goes on to say the casting recommendations leave a lot of details open, but one specific casting desire is for a Bourne-esque figure who is in their late 30s or 40s. Considering how Spider-Man Far From Home ended, Spider-Man could easily end up being on the run throughout the film. This would allow the villain to track him down on the largest scale possible, with the entire world watching and believing that he has killed Mysterio. Kraven, being a bounty hunter, even suggests that other similar villains could be after Spider-Man as well. Okay, so if you're a little bit confused, you're not alone. Like, this is kind of a confusing thing. I want to try to further explain what they're exactly talking about in this article. This casting call is for a solo Kraven the Hunter film that is potentially being developed at Sony. This is not an MCU casting sheet. Now, the big difference between this movie and Morbius and Venom, and the reason the article over at Illuminati even mentions the MCU and the fact that this puts Kraven potentially at the core of the MCU, is because they are actually putting in the call sheet that this character is going to be on the hunt for Spider-Man. When it came to Venom and Morbius, they didn't mention Spider-Man at all. Spider-Man was not on the casting call for either of these films, and this is definitely a big change. To me, this signals pretty clearly that the idea of the Kraven the Hunter movie will involve Spider-Man heavily. It's not going to be like Morbius and Venom, where it's its own thing, and Spider-Man might be in the Morbius movie, at least like on the wall contextually, but he might not actually be in that film, and he's certainly not going to be a big part of the plot. However, in Kraven, if this movie does end up being made the way they are trying to make it, it's totally going to involve Spider-Man as a main part of that movie. It signals to me that Sony is definitely putting Tom Holland in these Sony Marvel movies over there with their potential villains. This is something we've been speculating a lot about ever since the MCU and Sony deal fell apart and then came back together. The whole idea was, wow, Sony really wants to take Tom Holland and put him over in their own universe, and they don't care about having him connect to the MCU. This looks to be a plan that runs along the train of thought that Sony likely had when they separated from that deal with the MCU. They were like, look, we've got this character, we own all of these different characters through the licensing agreement, and that does include Mysterio and the Vulture, which were in MCU movies. And so Sony can take all of those characters, they can take Spider-Man back, they can do the Sinister Six, and they can do Kraven the Hunter hunting down Spider-Man. Now, some people were thinking that this actually means that Kraven the Hunter will run in conjunction with whatever they're doing with the MCU, that Kevin Feige will have a say in who they cast as Kraven the Hunter and perhaps use Kraven the Hunter in one of the MCU movies. But that is not in this article. That is not what the Illuminati is trying to present at all. In fact, all the signs point to this being strictly a Sony decision. Now, we do know that Feige has been interested in Kraven the Hunter, and he's wanted him for years. He actually wanted Kraven to be the villain of Spider-Man Homecoming, but that didn't work out. And I think there's a reason that Sony does not want to give Kraven the Hunter over to Kevin Feige. They have their own plans for him. And I think that if the idea was to share this character and have more of a connective tissue, then we would be seeing Kraven the Hunter cast for this next Spider-Man movie, which we'll start shooting later this year. The MCU one, right? The one that Feige got back Spider-Man for. But no, this isn't a Marvel casting call. This is a grid for a Sony casting decision. So really, this report points more to the future of the relationship between Sony's Marvel Universe and the MCU. Remember, Feige said Spider-Man is one of the only characters with the superpower to swing between cinematic universes. Spider-Man's going to swing over and be in the Sony stuff, where Sony will play with all of the things that they have the rights to, which is everything Spider-Man, but they will not be able to play with anything MCU. And anything established over here in the Sony Marvel universe will likely not come over to the MCU. You see, on the surface level, I think Sony wants people to believe that it's all connected, but it's really going to be a one-way street. And I think after the next movie, and maybe another movie that Tom Holland appears in the MCU as, I think it's over. I don't really think Spider-Man's going to be in the MCU after those two movies, and, that's fine. That's fine. Now, let's go to Speculation Town a little bit here. Guys, take my hand. Let's go to Speculation Town. Now, my knee-jerk reaction here was like, no, I want Feige to be the one to develop Kraven the Hunter. I would much rather have Kraven the Hunter be in the MCU. However, I do actually like a lot of the dark, gritty stuff that Sony seems to be doing with Morbius and that they did with Venom. And so I wouldn't hate it if we got a grounded, gritty, and dark version of Kraven the Hunter in the Sony Marvel universe. That to me is pretty cool. So although I'm a little bit upset that he won't be playing around in the MCU, by and large, it's still awesome that we're going to get Kraven. And man, if we get this dark version of it, I think I'm going to be on board. I think this also eliminates Kraven as the villain of the next Spider-Man movie in the MCU, and it'll be very interesting to see how that film is handled. A lot of people think Feige will figure out a way to wrap up that story within the MCU and sort of take Spider-Man off the table from anything major while he goes and plays over in the Sony films, but then Spider-Man will eventually come back for one more big MCU movie, likely to be an ensemble movie, Avengers movie, or something like that. Now, I do think that Spider-Man, the next Spider-Man movie under Marvel Studios, will probably see Kevin Feige develop yet again another Sony Spider-Man-owned villain in the MCU, but maybe not. Maybe Feige has sort of learned his lesson, and he's actually going to pit Peter up against some actual MCU villains in that film just to really separate that story from whatever they do over at Sony. We really have no idea. Like, it's really hard to know for sure. How nice are they being? How much are they going to play ball with each other? What does all of that really look like? We're going to get a lot more answers soon, but I think this casting call and this story about Kraven does give us some information. It does show us where Sony's head is at the very least, and they're keeping the goods over there. They're doing Sinister Six, and they feel very confident in their ability to do a Spider-Man universe over at Sony. Now, the last thing I'll say is I think it's really interesting that the casting call is looking for a Jason Bourne type character that to basically play Kraven. That seems really cool to me. So having Spider-Man fight up against like a Jason Bourne type Kraven the Hunter, yes, please. That sounds really cool. Also, before we get out of here, I want to just talk about Illuminati again. This is really crazy. They're coming out of nowhere, and I just want to run off a list of a couple exclusives, actually several exclusives, that they have run in the past couple of weeks. They've ran that Miss Marvel is shooting, and its date has shifted from April to August. They have run the exclusive that Christian Bale is playing an alien villain in Thor 4. They have run the exclusive that there's been the casting grid for the Kraven the Hunter Solo film. They ran the exclusive that Baron Mordo is set to return in Doctor Strange 2. Brother Voodoo and America Chavez are also set to appear. They ran the exclusive that Loki is set to debut Sarah. They ran the exclusive that Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings is casting Rosalind Chow as a key role for the film. They ran that Hulkling is set to debut in WandaVision and that he'll be connected to Sword. And the crazy thing is, none of this stuff has exactly been confirmed, but because a lot of scoopers that I trust seem to be corroborating this information, I'm going with it. And Illuminati is like fresh and hot on the scene, but we're going to have to take everything with them from a grain of salt, or with a grain of salt rather, until we get more information about them. Look, I'm comfortable reporting what they're reporting because the people I trust are telling me that these guys are good, but they are very fresh and new on the scene. I respect the hustle. I respect the scoops that they're getting. It's really wild, but we do have to be cautious. They're just a new kind of personality, a new junket out there, or new scoopers out there, whatever you want to call it. So we just got to be careful with running Illuminati stuff until we get some of this stuff that they have been talking about confirmed. But damn, they're running a lot of excuses, so you got to respect the hustle at the very least. But that's the news out there, guys. Another crazy scoop by Illuminati talking about the weirdness going on with Kraven the Hunter over at Sony. We also talked about the weirdness that is Illuminati and how many scoops they've gotten over the past couple of weeks, and we speculated a little bit about what all of this Kraven business could mean for the MCU and Sony. So let me know your thoughts about any and everything we discussed here in the comment section below. And now let's shout out C Mo. Indeed, Jane Foster picks up Thor's hammer from the moon in the comics. So shout out to you, C. Mo. And now let's ask another nerd card question before we get out of here. This one's kind of fun. I want to know, who is Kraven the Hunter related to in Marvel Comics that is also a Spider-Man villain? Yeah, it's super weird. Kraven the Hunter is related to another Spider-Man villain. What villain am I talking about? Answer that question in the comments section below. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.